6:21 in Trinidad and Tobago. Before we go into our discussion with Attorney at Law Martin George in relation to his recommendations following the tragic murder of the German couple over the weekend, let's go to our news package reporting on the situation.
No stone will in fact be unturned to ensure that we discover, identify, arrest and charge the perpetrators of this crime.
An assurance from top cop Stephen Williams that the murders of 71-year-old Hubertus Keel and his wife 74-year-old Bridget Keel will not go unsolved. Mr. Williams said top-notch investigators have been put on the case.
Comprising numerous units of the police service, including the criminal gang and intelligence unit, the CID, and we are in fact treating this matter as our highest priority.
Commissioner Williams said the police are pulling out all the stops to get justice.
The police service will continue to commit all available resources. I've given that assurance to the Assistant Commissioner. All the available resources that he requires, we will be providing it to ensure that this matter is extensively investigated, speedily investigated, and not compromised in the investigation by way of speed, but treating the matter so that we can bring a closure to this investigation, a successful closure with the arrest of whoever is responsible for this heinous crime.
Hubertus and Bridget Keel were found hacked to death meters apart at Ministers Bay, Bacalet last Saturday. The bodies bore gaping wounds to the back of the neck. Crime Stoppers is also on board with the police in seeking to have the murderers apprehended. If you have information that can assist the police, you can call hotline numbers 708-9320 or 708-9142. Elizabeth Williams, TV6 News.
6:23 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, we're now joined via Skype. It's not a particularly reliable Skype line, I have to admit, but we do have with us Attorney at Law Martin George, who is, by the way, the Tobago House of Assembly's representative on Crime Stoppers Trinidad and Tobago. He's calling for the Victim Support Unit for the victims of crime on the island, whereby the THA will have an official liaison unit within the police service in the sister isle of Tobago. Good morning to you, Mr. George. Hopefully you're hearing us loud and clear, or loud and clear enough.
Loud and clear for Zero. Good morning to you and good morning Trinidad and Tobago.
Why making this call now? Because it does appear as if you might be jumping on the bandwagon of foreigners being killed rather than the case when locals are killed.
Well, actually, for Zero, when I made the call yesterday morning, I indicated that it's something that I wish to see, not just for foreigners, but also for locals. Because for Zero, we have had experiences where clients of ours have had interactions with the police service where they were victims of crime, and they said that they were made to feel like victims all over again due to the interactions they've had with the police service. I also had the pleasure and privilege to listen to and witness the interview you did yesterday morning with Mr. Green. And if you recall, one of the things that he spoke most passionately about and seemed to feel, the strongest sentiment about was the way the police authorities dealt with himself and his wife and how they treated them in the entire scenario. So I think that what we need to look at is creating that ameliorating effect whereby, notwithstanding the fact that a tragedy has occurred, a serious crime has occurred, not just for foreigners, but even for locals, but if you have this intervening unit, which I think the THA must take responsibility for, whereby you have that liaison effect, whereby persons don't have to keep running to the police station every 2 days. When you go there, they say, well, the investigating officer is not here, you have to come back, or you sit and you wait whole day, the investigating officer is never around, nobody can tell you anything because they say it's only that particular investigating officer who can give you information as to what is happening. I have seen scenarios where clients say that after they report a crime, they are made to fill out a second report, an even more detailed report, And one lady in particular asked the officers, well, why am I filling out all this personal information about myself? Whether you have scars, whether you have tattoos, whether you have piercings, everything about you. And the police officer told her, well, in case you become a criminal too, we will already have you on file. So the whole approach, I think, needs to be softened in terms of how you deal with persons who themselves have already been traumatized and are coming to you as a victim.
But shouldn't this have been done already, and that it didn't need to have another tragedy, especially involving two foreign nationals, and now all of the concerns as to Tobago getting a bad name and being tarnished tourism-wise? Shouldn't this already have been functional in Tobago, a victim support unit?
Well, I fully agree with you, particularly after all the negative publicity which has arisen from the matter with the Greens. And if you notice, Mr. and Mrs. Green appear to have now made it their mission to seek to publicize their plight and to warn and deter people from traveling to Tobago. So I still think we need to make some further interventions with them. Now, I think that their claims of wanting £1 million compensation, I think those are outrageous and cannot in any court of law be sustained. That's my honest view. So the point is we need to balance the scales. While we reach out to them with an olive branch, they must also recognize that this is not a scenario where, because you make threats of going to further media houses and, trying to tarnish the name of Tobago, that you are going to each end up getting £1 million in compensation. On that score also, Fazil, I would like to make a call for there to be established in Tobago also the post of a Tobago diplomatic ambassador. It's something I have raised previously in my articles and columns. I have raised it on the talk shows, and I'm asking again that the government consider a Tobago diplomatic ambassador post. The reason for that is in circumstances such as this one, you have an ambassador who specifically seeks the interest of Tobago. So therefore, this would be the first contact person to liaise with the German ambassador in Trinidad and Tobago. You can liaise directly with the family in Germany, and you can actually try to turn this into something where you learn lessons from it and some good eventually comes out of it. So depending on how you manage the situation, because at the end of the day, I am not happy with the way these travel advisories are issued. When you had the bombings in the London subway, which was an act of terrorism, I did not hear anyone issue an advisory saying don't travel to London, don't go to London, it's an unsafe place. You've had in the USA the 9/11 disaster, you've had the Oklahoma bombings, you've had, every other week you have some school child going and turning the gun on his classmates and his teachers. So I don't hear anyone saying that the USA is an unsafe place. So in other words, we must always put things in context. If you do have criminal activities occurring and they appear to be isolated or fairly random attacks, then we must keep it in that context. We must not allow a foreign nation to now tarnish the entire country of Trinidad and Tobago and say that the entire country is unsafe to go. So a Tobago diplomatic ambassador position can help to work along with these foreign countries. You let them understand that, look, first of all, these advisories are not fair, they are not reflective of what is happening on the ground. And then we in Trinidad and Tobago, particularly Tobago, we must also do our part. There's need for education, to educate the public in Tobago so they understand a tourist is someone who is coming here to help build your economy. It's not someone that you try to take advantage of by overcharging them, trying to see how much you can gouge from them. That's not the role of a visitor. You are supposed to treat a visitor in such a way that they're happy to come back, they're happy to recommend their friends and family and say, hey, Tobago is a fantastic place. Even if a tragedy such as this occurred, the way you handle it afterwards, if you meet with the family, you reach out to them, maybe you offer to fly them down, you bring them up to date, you keep them, abreast of all that is happening, you treat them so well that these relatives will be able to say, hey, listen, a tragedy occurred in Tobago with our family members. However, those people in Tobago, they're so nice. They treated us so well that we are happy to still recommend Tobago, because we have to try to get the positives for zero out of every tragedy or every negative experience in life.
Why does it appear, Mr. George, that there's more concern about the dollars and cents damage to Trinidad and especially Tobago, tourism-wise, than the personal tragedy of Germans being slaughtered in the Sister Isles?
Well, for you, there's always a cost to crime for every country in the world. It's not something unique to Trinidad and Tobago. In Trinidad, there's a cost to crime whereby you have increased security, private security firms, you have increases in persons insurance. There's always a cost to crime to any country. If you look at what happened in Kenya over the weekend, whereby 26 persons were slaughtered on a bus, obviously, things like that would have a damaging effect on your tourism economy, because persons will begin to think, well, maybe Kenya is not a safe place to go. If you remember the attack on the mall in Kenya, whereby one of our most brilliant sons of Trinidad and Tobago was lost in that tragedy. So it always has a cost to it. So we cannot blind ourselves to the reality and just simply try to, approach it from an altruistic point of view to say, well, we are not concerned about the dollars and cents. You must always be, because that is the bottom line. However,
is it, Mr. George, is it in a matter of, if I could interrupt you, is it a matter of the bottom line being dollars and cents? Shouldn't it be the preservation of law and order?
Well, Fazil, obviously it's preservation of law and order, but as I say, in the context of a small island nation, whereby you're talking about one of the islands being tourism dependent, then it's always dollars and cents. If you look at the way Barbados, for instance, manages their tourism product, they are always very careful, even on any news that comes out about crimes against tourists. But then also they have put systems in place whereby they deal with such matters swiftly and effectively in their courts. They try very quickly to apprehend persons. So at the end of the day, you are in the context of, yes, a life has been lost, and that is the fundamental criteria. However, you recognize that this has a spin-off, a ripple effect for your economic situation, and therefore, from both aspects, you try to manage it.
And in that context, Mr. George, it would appear, as even though you've described the claim by the Greens as outrageous for £1 million each compensation, they would appear to be absolutely on the ball in doing what they're doing, because according to what Mr. Green said yesterday, the Tobago House of Assembly, and he identified over London specifically, have been basically dragging their tails on this, and therefore he felt he had no option but to embarrass Tobago internationally.
And that's why I said, Fazil, we really need this victim support unit. That's why I made the call yesterday, because I was particularly perturbed by Mr. Green's interview with you yesterday, because you can still sense the bitterness. The wounds are still raw in terms of that couple. And clearly that means that Tobago has not done a sufficiently good job of post-traumatic intervention. In other words, a tragedy has occurred. How do we manage it thereafter? And that's why I'm saying the THA has to take the responsibility. They have to try to show that they are taking the steps, and one of the greatest steps they can do is setting up a properly managed, properly staffed victim support unit.
And a final thought, Mr. George, in relation to this matter, because you do have the issue of the Greens coming into it because of what occurred some 5 years ago, and their feeling of injustice over it. But in specific reference to this matter, wouldn't it be a case of the police pursuing this matter as expeditiously as possible in pursuit of the criminals and justice being done? Wouldn't that be part of the most comforting way to deal with this issue for the families of those who have been killed?
Well, it's a major part of it, Fazil, but I think more than that, what is needed is a public education campaign in Tobago. Tobago claims that it wants to be a tourist destination, but from what I have observed, and when you compare it with the way tourism is approached in almost every other island on the planet, it is clear to me that the officials in Tobago do not have a clue as to what tourism is about. The tourism experience is supposed to be a pleasant, enjoyable experience whereby the visitor is happy to spend his money. He has avenues to spend that money. He is safe, he's protected, he feels welcomed, he's treated with courtesy and respect. He has good quality service when he goes to restaurants. He has good quality service when he deals with a taxi driver or the folks at the airport, not a sullen, sulky attitude whereby persons behave as if, well, they're doing you a favor. You see, we still have this anachronistic approach of thinking that service is servitude. It is not. You go to any other island, you take, for instance, St. Martin, where people are happy to serve you. They serve you with a smile. Even if you go to a store and you don't want something, they say, "Thank you, sir. Have a nice day. Please come again." So everybody feels that sense of well-being and joie de vivre, so that they're happy to tell their friends, "Hey, come to Tobago."
We have to leave it there for the moment, Mr. George. Thanks very much. I know that's a broader issue that we could develop even further at another time, but thanks very much for offering us your perspective this morning. Attorney at Law Martin George, who's also the THA's representative on Crime Stoppers Trinidad and Tobago. While we're going to the